Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 5 of MotorLAT's English Language News Roundup. I'm waiting for David as always. We're going to talk all things F1 and not only that. So brace yourself for a very, very interesting episode. We are summing up, trying to connect. Hopefully you can. Hi.
How are you, B?
I'm fine, and you?
Very well. How are we doing on the scene?
Perfect. I can see you, I can hear you, everything's all right from me.
Lovely stuff. Audio's a bit crackly my end, but we'll be fine. Just let's go for it. What would you like to discuss?
Well, so we are going to start off with a virtual season, which is finally over. We've seen George Russell on a roll. He's been crowned the champion of the stay-at-home sort of World Cup since he's been winning races from his very own bedroom. But how do you see this esports season from Formula One? What are your thoughts on this?
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been watching lots of the Twitch streams in the build-up to it with just the boys kind of fooling around and seeing more of their personality. But what was really telling was the way the other drivers have spoken about George. The little one-liners like, he's been on it for hours and he's put loads of laps in. So they all know he's made a conscious effort to race at the front, and it's worked. He's won the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were talking about the skill set that virtual games require just about a week ago, many drivers have actually decided not to take part in it because they're not familiar with the game. Instead, we can see that George Russell's approach was totally different because he wanted to put in an effort, he wanted to prove himself, and that just shows. He's been winning.
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, we all know George Russell. We know his achievements in Formula 3 and in the other classes as well. And I've just seen one of our comments saying how people viewing this feed, they do not know who you are. They can see my picture, but they would like to know a little bit more about our chief editor of MotorLAT British. Take it away.
Oh, well, I'm just a passionate person about motorsport. I just wanted to bring everyone closer to my view in motorsport. I've been involved in this industry for over 5 years, I think. I was pretty young. I was underage when I first started. So here I am. And now I'm managing a group of English language people talking about motorsport.
And doing a remarkable job. Speaking now 4 or 5 languages. I lose track.
5 if we include my mother language, Italian. But you're too kind, David.
We certainly must. And I mean, that's exactly it, because I think that's a really good point from, I couldn't see the name of the person who left the comment, but some of the drivers before lockdown were only known as a number on a race car. And we know some people had their critics of Grosjean, and Grosjean's social media has really invited people to seeing him as a homeschool teacher for his children. And then Nicholas Latifi did his work with Twitch streams. And so everyone's learning more about people. And then you yourself getting to know our viewers and giving them an insight into you. And I think George Russell was no fool. He knew a good profile, talk of the Mercedes seat for 2021, it was not going to harm his stock value in any way to have a successful series.
Absolutely. And may we remind everyone that esports, as we perceive them throughout quarantine, were basically cost zero. So it wasn't really about spending money. It wasn't really about planning a race with travels, restrictions, paperwork. That was just pure passion, pure drive, literally, of people that wanted to prove themselves. just like George Russell did, just like Nicholas Latifi did. Actually, his case was quite remarkable since he has made his debut on a virtual race as in Formula One.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, what's been really nice is the comparisons people have made with George Russell's times and then the real times of the sim racers. And I'm a follower of Jimmy Broadbent, whose profile has raised exponentially from the Formula One series and not the GP. And he's now got more than 500,000 subscribers, and he's been talking to his fans and his following. And it would be nice if the spotlight continues on the sim races when the real racing starts.
Yeah, but also I wanted to point out that as for virtual races, there is not much of that real interest in sim races, although they are real professionals when it comes to driving and adapting to a racetrack. I mean, at least virtually. Whereas drivers have really brought a very big boost to the sort of racing and esports field. So that was even very healthy for sim racers as well, because I really think that it was a breakthrough moment for them. So they really have to thank COVID-19.
That is the really nice thing. I mean, human spirit and the way that people can triumph. And previously, I wrote about the work of Captain Tom in the UK, who's now Colonel Tom, and all the fact that he's a Formula One fan and the team took to him, and it's just been trying to find human stories during COVID-19. And what's really interesting is Max Verstappen's kind of completely off the radar, apart from, a Porsche race here, an unfortunate virtual Le Mans because of the trouble which Team Redline experienced. I think he's in the kind of Vettel bubble, and coming back for the first 3 races, he's going to be on it.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always been very opinionated. I'm talking Verstappen's quotes, which were always very, very bold. So I really support that side of the driver, because we need more characters. We need more people who are vocal about this. But at the same time, I do worry about esports, because as much as they got a big boost during quarantine and during COVID-19 times, I do fear that they are going to suffer a significant drop in popularity as racing resumes, because we have so many clashes within series throughout July, throughout August. So many people are going to focus on that, and the attention will kind of shift from virtual racing full on to real racing flat out again.
The jewel in the crown for Codemasters and Formula One is the fact that for the Formula One esports series, by buying the Formula One edition of the game, you have a chance to compete, you have a chance to get through time trials, you have a chance to be into the pro draft. So as the schedule and the fact the game is released pretty soon, they'll still have quite a bit of good publicity and a lot of fanfare with that. But I think, yeah, the real test will be September, October time, when people haven't got so much time on their hands, it's not holidays. Where is their time going? What are they spending their energy watching?
Yeah, we will see. It is going to be very interesting, because as the season goes on, we will see what the real interest in virtual races and games is like from Formula One fans who have been missing real racing a lot. And that actually brings to our next topic, which is going to be the calendar. I just wanted to give our viewers a quick reminder about some developments on the Italian side, since people have been talking about a second Italian Grand Prix, and it seems like Mugello is really happening after Monza. What do you think about that?
I think it's tremendous. I mean, it comes back to what we said a few moments ago about the human stories and the solidarity and people having some hope to really move forward. And with the news of Mugello being pretty much rubber stamped, and then obviously it was announced that Formula One management had spoken to Shanghai and said, could you do a double header? And it's kind of rays of hope for all these areas around the world. For Mugello, Formula One racing, it would be phenomenal.
Absolutely. And as exciting as a Mugello race, I would take the whole on-track action resuming from Formula One drivers who are just slowly getting back on track, as we saw Renault in Austria, as we saw Racing Point today at Silverstone. And oddly enough, they were the first team who was running their 2020 car.
And that, of course, brought the inevitable one-liner, keyboard warriors saying, "You mean the 2019 Mercedes?" But people have to move beyond that, because FIA have investigated. They've said very clearly there are certainly lots of differences between the two machines. So I think it's really important, especially in this special season where every point matters, and Racing Point should be right near the front in the points, definitely. People have to start celebrating them for the work they've achieved.
Yeah, I mean, people have not exactly moved on about it because they haven't really seen what it's like in a Grand Prix. I mean, in the pecking order, it's still a very big unknown. As everyone was talking about it at winter testing, everything kind of stopped due to unforeseen circumstances. So I think that people and those keyboard warriors you mentioned are still going to be very vocal about this until they get their opportunity to simply shut up once the first Grand Prix is done.
I mean, that's the thing. I think Racing Point is kind of a victim of its history, the teams that's evolved and things, and obviously some of the racers. We had the comment from Lewis Hamilton, of course, when he was like, "I'm not gonna call it Racing Point, calling it a Force India." And obviously we have websites which quite ruthlessly talk about Lance Stroll, will he crash, and all these kind of things. People seem to enjoy a pastime of either taking the mickey or mimicking what's going on at Racing Point. Whereas Otmar's work has been incredible. He's been in Formula One for many, many years. He was celebrating with Jenson Button on a recap of a previous victory, the longest Grand Prix ever. They were recalling it and things. And so people have to kind of wait for the season. Let's see what happens. But I think Racing Point are going to surprise quite a few people. But what I did find very shocking was Daniel Ricciardo's just seamless return to Renault on track. Like, no comments about what Beatrice said, no comments about the fact he's moving on. He is focused on getting a podium for Renault, and that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, because he still feels that he got a lot to prove before moving on to McLaren. So I really respect this kind of attitude, putting your head down, working straight on, just like Maurizio Arrivabene used to say about Ferrari a while back. Because Daniel Ricciardo is all about having a good relationship with the team, having a great send-off, being remembered and keeping very good relationships within the team, despite many differences that can occur, obviously, throughout a history with a team. So I really respect that, and I really think that it wasn't really needed to comment on Abiteboul's remarks, since he's been talking about the budget cap and very, very technical aspects. As we saw earlier this week, he's talking about 2026, which is going to be the next battlefield. I just think that Daniel Ricciardo wants to be focused on the present, and that's just what every driver should do at the moment, because we haven't been racing for 6 months straight. So racing from the drivers, that's all we need. We will have plenty of time for further comments later on in the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've spoken many times about Esteban Ocon and the talent he has, and the hard challenge he will have with Ricciardo, and those edging each other out. But I think Carlos Sainz is going to find himself under quite a bit of pressure from Lando Norris, because those first opening races of the season in 2019, they were not very kind to Carlos, and Lando Norris certainly had the edge. So it'll be really interesting to see if that follows suit in 2020. How these teammates who are having big moves respond with their current teammates.
Well, actually, everyone is going to look at Carlos Sainz as the driver who is going to move up to Ferrari. So a driver who's been promoted to such a big team needs to be very, very careful about his performances, because obviously if he makes a mistake in the opening races, everyone is going to make big headlines about his future. So I think that he just really needs to detach himself from the media, from what everybody says, in order not to impact his mental state, which is glorious at the moment, because he's coming out of a great season. I mean, 2019, despite his beginning, which was going through quite a rough patch at the beginning, he's had a great ending, as we saw in Brazil with a podium. So he just needs to keep on that rate, and he will do very well. I mean, everybody wants to see him do well before he leaves McLaren, because he's played such a key role in restoring the team and bringing it back to such a high level.
Yeah, I really hope he can almost put himself in a media bubble, because due to the fact that we all know there's going to be reduced media at the Grand Prix, the papers, the magazines, they still need column inches to write about. And something like Carlos Sainz having a little bit of a struggle at the start of the season would be kind of just cannon fodder for them. They would be like, oh yes, we can get many stories out of this. So I think he needs to put himself in that media bubble and just kind of wait and see what happens. Because like you said, he had a phenomenal end to 2019, but he certainly didn't start off the best. So I really hope he does well, because he's a lovely guy. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's such a genuine person. I do agree with you. And speaking about bubbles, as we saw, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, since we saw the guidelines issued by the FIA with the World Health Organization, many paddock measures to contain the spread of COVID-19. People are going to be tested every 48 hours, reduced staff, social distancing enforced. But that brings me to a very contradicting point, as people from teams are going to be split into little bubbles. So people are going to work in groups, but in case someone tests positive, teams will have to get extra personnel as a backup. So that brings them to spend more money, and that is what they don't really want to do as for this very challenging time, because we know that Ferrari, for example, really wants to cut costs, even with drivers' pays. But at the same time, if they need to have a backup plan as for personnel, they need to pay their trips.
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot written about that. There's been lots about the fact that teams will be sharing reserve drivers, and again, the media likes to kind of go to the far extreme. So like, oh, there's going to be one driver for two teams and all these kind of things. I mean, these aren't familiar circumstances where teams have had different reserve drivers, so people kind of have to press the reset button on that. But I think it is very interesting. They're talking about they will fly in personnel who replace these people. So, I mean, when we get to the flyaways, it may be okay in Europe, but when you're looking at a 14 to 16-hour journey, you've got to wonder about the feasibility of it for a 3 or 4 day event. What's the point of doing this? So, yeah, I was very surprised by hearing that.
Yeah, me too, because they talked about isolated traveling. So they are doing basically mass travelings inside the single team. For example, they're going to fly 50 people from McLaren, and they're going to obviously travel all together. But since they have to fly in more people as a backup, this is not going to sound so much sensible in terms of cost capping measures and obviously feasibility. So that was a big unknown and a very big point to prove as for now from Formula One. As well as the decision to scrap the podium ceremony. That is going to be dramatic. That is going to be remembered forever. And I don't know how convenient and positive it's going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's the season's not going to look the same. You think about some of the images of ceremonies and podium celebrations and jubilation of drivers with mechanics and all that kinds of stuff. In theory, I don't see why, if the team is isolated together, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen should still be able to jump into their own team. Like, you're in close contact with each other, especially if he's still wearing his helmet. Should be able to jump into the team and have some of that kind of jubilation. But the fact they're not going to do podium celebrations and ceremonies like that, it makes sense because there's no one in the grandstands. but it also can't undervalue the success of the driver. I mean, if we think of maybe a driver who gets their first victory in Formula One, and it's going to be like nothing, they've got to make sure it's celebrated in some way.
Yeah, it's very likely that they will find the trophy right next to the car so that the celebration is done basically right after they cross the line and they do the final lap. And it's kind of, as you said, undervaluing the effort of the driver. Obviously, I don't know how people are going to perceive this year's world champion, as it's going to be a very odd season, reduced calendar. So my fear is that this year's champion is going to be considered as a not so worthy champion at the end of the story.
I think that's why we have to wait for the races, because at the moment I'm thinking exactly like you, that people will be putting asterisks by this year, and for any records and for anything like that. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton going for a record equaling 7th title if he got there, if Charles Leclerc got there, if Max Verstappen was one of the youngest world champions. There's so many potential things, and so we need to see how they get the race victories, and if they are hard fought endurance battles. We're going to have the heat of Spain, which will be so much like Singapore almost, and see how these drivers are when they get out the car. If they're looking exerted, if they're looking like they've given it their all, the history books maybe won't represent it, but the fans' memory will. And this is where fans' power comes into it so much. Like we can talk about, we saw Carlos Sainz's podium celebration in Brazil. There were no fans in the crowd, but it was a momentous celebration. So if there's something like that we get, if Sergio Perez is scoring highly, it all depends on the teams. The teams need to give us something to remember.
Yeah. I do agree with the podium celebration of Carlos Sainz. It was all about the team. There were no spectators. But I remember the social media celebration, even from the media as well. I was working for Sky. I was doing their social media work. So it was my duty to promote this sort of deed that McLaren was truly missing and needing for such a long time, since they have gone through so much. So my purpose and my ultimate quest was to basically celebrate and enforce their spirit as much as they really did on track. So I was posting videos, I was posting many tweets, also from the fans, because many people from Italy already loved Carlos Sainz back in the day, even before the Ferrari move. So that was very heartwarming to witness. And so fans through social media will have such an important role. So we really need to rely on them. And I'm sure they will do such a great job in replacing all the cheering and jeering as well from the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, he did a remarkable job, obviously, promoting it. And we've got Chris Medland, who does an awful lot with getting news out there on his tweets. Yeah. And, of course, Matt Gallagher and all those kind of more light-hearted side of the sport. It'll be really interesting in the immediate hours after the Grand Prix. Now, hopefully, even if it wasn't an exciting race, we're going to remember 6 months ago we had no racing. So let's take it one step at a time. But yeah, social media and the fact that Bernie Ecclestone isn't putting this stranglehold on Formula One, not going on social media anymore, because Liberty Media are in charge, social media could be where it gets new life.
Yes. Where the magic truly happens, because social media has always been so creative with memes, with humor stuff, with news, with videos. So it is such a big celebration once you enter Twitter, because you see the excitement of the people, because you see even quarrels happening. So that's engaging. So I truly think that on so many levels, social media are going to be key now more than ever.
Yeah, and Gorko Yaga, just as we're on social media here, says, pretty sure that Sainz will do a great career at Ferrari. And of course, Ferrari seems to have got maybe a few little upgrades that we weren't expecting. That's going to have a chance to push them a little bit further near the front for 2020. So maybe people are a bit too soon writing off Ferrari's chances in the immediacy of the season. What are your thoughts on these little upgrades that have kind of seeped out into the news?
I mean, obviously they were on the back foot as preseason testing started. So everyone was worried about Ferrari's, you know, gap from the real big boys as Mercedes and even Racing Point. So I truly think that they didn't stop the work as quarantine started. So before the shutdown, they didn't really stop thinking about innovation and upgrades. So I really think that they were going to push a lot in order to make up for that big gap that was pretty evident at the beginning of the preseason.
Nice. So you're expecting the others to catch them relatively quickly. I mean, is there time for much R&D with so many races so close together?
Not so quickly, but obviously they know that it's going to be pretty hectic, so they really needed to bring their A game during this shutdown period. Obviously, some departments have not really stopped working. So, and as Jacques Villeneuve said, people are not working currently, as he said, during quarantine, but that doesn't prevent them from thinking about innovation. So yeah. I really think that tells a lot.
Yeah, and of course the innovation we're all waiting to see in action is lovely DAS. What is that going to look like when it happens, and what will be the benefit of that? And if anything shows possible difficulties there, because the cars are carrying over effectively into 2021, but of course Mercedes can't use this system. So there's going to be some cost involved to make sure it's effectively deleted from the car.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that many checks from the FIA are going to be enforced even by rival teams, because we know that Ferrari has been pretty vocal about it, as much as Red Bull and many other rivals. Just because this actually stunned the opposition. Mercedes came up with this great idea, and everyone was very surprised and flabbergasted even during preseason testing, because it was such a big news and so innovative that everyone thought Mercedes could actually go no further as for innovation and creative solutions, but they just proved them wrong.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we know that the cost cap is coming and the budget cap, and Formula One will become cheaper for teams. And I think this was one of the big kind of the lines in the sand, where if we think about the double diffuser from years before, and the other teams were told, well, you know, you've got to catch up. Someone's thought of something ingenious, and you've got to try and match it. But now they're like, oh, the costs involved, the DAS, okay, we'll just ban that, and they can forget all about it. And that is very sad to see, definitely.
Yeah, I think that 2020 will be the last call to spend as much money as possible on innovations, because, you know, the effects of the budget cap are going to be seen within the next 1 year, 2 years. So obviously teams are going to get the upper hand on the rivals as of now, rather than in 1 year's time, because obviously the budget cap is becoming a real restrictive measure in terms of their resources. So everyone will be using this time, although it's going to be pretty hectic as for the calendar, to gain some ground on the others.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read an article by Ross Brawn before coming online, and they are not shying away from the fact that they are quite certain they would have lost manufacturers had this not come into play. It's not kind of like, oh, this is evolving Formula One, this is the next step, we look for a brighter future. They are saying quite clearly the sport would have been close to unrecognizable from maybe losing 3 or 4 manufacturers. And of course, we know the other manufacturers aren't coming along till 2026. And so it's brilliant that they've done this implementation. But as I said in an article this week, it's going to be to the privateers now for 22 and 2023. Maybe Carlin Racing going to come and join the big boys. We need to have something happen, because there's no guarantee our teams will still have that stability and status quo. And 20 cars on the grid, we need more. We need a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the V6 turbo era just took a toll on the whole healthy Formula One side, because it became so restrictive in terms of manufacturers affording to be there. So the budget cap, as it evolves and it gets lower and lower as the years go on, it's going to make Formula One more inclusive, which is going to be potentially good, as Cyril Abiteboul said. Otherwise, Formula One does not become just an unaffordable sort of championship, but also a championship that other manufacturers are not really interested in whatsoever. So that could cause some problems also from a PR side for Formula One, in case the budget cap was not going to be enforced.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've spoken before about Formula E and attracting the manufacturers and the other teams that are having their head turned. I don't think it's a coincidence that Mercedes announced today how the MGU8 is now being used in road cars, and they're kind of saying to the world of motorsport, if you like, don't say that Formula One doesn't have a knock-on effect in the real world. I thought that was very interesting how it's talking about the change in the powertrain, the team is changing, there'll be revolutionaries, but the MGUH is being used in road cars. What we do has a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, they just really need to focus again on the fact that Formula One is actually making a contribution to the automotive world, because they have been challenged so deeply and hardly from Formula E, as they picture themselves as the only outlet for the future, whereas Formula One really wants to just carry out the message that they still are the pinnacle of motorsport and they are the ultimate platform for the automotive side. So they just need to keep on this very good level of of collaborations between the different departments, because technologies can be still applied to the automotive sector from Formula One. So there is this very big bond between the two, and Mercedes did just that. They said, look, there is still a big bond within the two, and Formula E is not the only one who's thinking about this crossover.
Yeah, they're very much playing both camps, aren't they? They're hedging their bets, and they're like, we'll do some work over here, we'll do some work over here, and it's nice to see that they're thinking so forward-looking and things like that. Because of course we lost Toyota from LMP1 in WEC, which is so sad. That car was beautiful, an absolutely miraculous machine, and it's considered farewell city, and we don't want any more Prince farewells. We need people to join the sport, not leave the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, because sports are always inclusive. They have this very inclusive nature deeply rooted within them. So I just think that they need to keep working towards it rather than becoming less affordable for other manufacturers. And I think that as for now, Formula One is in a very good place. It could be better, but they are working towards being in a stable position and in a very good place. As for people joining the sport, we've always talked about fans who actually become passionate about Formula One through social media. Many youngsters, I've seen thousands of tweets from youngsters who are very sad that they cannot come to races until the end of the year. But Ross Brawn, in an e-conference, said that maybe he's not ruling out the presence of the fans by the end of 2020, because he thinks that people in the grandstands are less impactful than people in a football stadium as for social distancing. What's your take on this?
I mean, obviously we lost Singapore because Singapore can't have the fans, and so we lost a wonderful race, one of the marquee races that everyone talks about, the night race. And so from a business point of view and indicating for future money rolling in, I can understand exactly why Ross Brawn said fans will have a chance probably to return, but we're not going to rush into it. So he's not put any definite timeline. He alluded to the fact that it might be the end of the European season, but then in the same sentence he kind of said, but we're not going to rush into it. And we've all been to Grand Prix events, and a fan either buys merchandise or a program, or program and merchandise. And then you've got the concessions, the hospitality, stuff like that. So when they are talking about the money side of things, Formula One is going to make an awful lot less. And so it's going to be good to see what the website does, because the website needs to try and get some of recouping those funds.
Yeah, And also merchandise is going to play a huge role during this 2020 season, because obviously teams are going to live on the sales of merchandise, and also Formula One really wants to keep people close also through that aspect, because let's not forget that the events, for example, Formula One events, also rely on the fact that many people are there selling goods from the teams, for example, just like that McLaren shirt, that Ferrari cap that we see on people who are randomly becoming visible on TV.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, to almost a different extent. I mean, we think back to the grid girls, of course, and grid girls, a large amount of them went around with the Formula One circus and traveled the world. But now they have no place in the sport. The sport has decided that it's not suitable. And so there were teams of the merchandise, like you said. The Red Bull team would go around with all the races, and they would just set up shop and they would sell their stuff. So what are those men and women going to do for their economy, for their finance, for their earning? It's a big factor that you have to think about. What are they going to do with their job?
I think that 2020 is going to be a very weird year for everyone. So I just think that they will have to temporarily look at elsewhere as for opportunities. But I think that I'm quite positive about 2021, as everything will slowly get back to normal. So I think that many people will be back along with the fans, along with the fully crowded media center. So I just think that everything will be bigger and better for 2021. And as we were talking about the presence of grid girls, I'm bringing you the latest news about Jamie Chadwick. Obviously, she's a top tier in the female field, W Series champion. She earned her opportunity to race with Prema, so with the high-profile team in Formula 3 Regional. What do you think about this news?
Yeah, it was great. I saw her announcement on Instagram during her little selfie video that got really well received, which was great to see. Obviously, her talent speaks for itself from last year, W Series champion. And looking ahead to next year, we know the W Series is going to have a place on the Formula One calendar at certain races, which will raise the profile there more. So 2020 for Jamie specifically, to be a chance to kind of build her profile, build her stock value. There's no bad scenario that can come from this at all. She's putting herself on the map in a different category. She can go back to the W Series if she wants next year. She loses nothing, she gains everything. It's a remarkable signing by Prema. It really is.
Yeah. Do you think that in perhaps 3 years' time she will get a seat, not just as a reserve drive role in Formula One?
This is a very good question. We know about Susie Wolff. We know how close she got. We know about the naysayers who came in saying that they said that there was, I'm just seeing, they said that my audio couldn't be heard too clearly. Can you hear my audio?
I can hear you perfectly. So I just think he was referring to a few minutes back, but I did understand your point, your sentences. So I just think that it was about a few seconds, really. No problem at all. You can carry on.
Thanks for keeping us on our toes, Gorka. Thank you very much indeed. They say a lot. They say for ladies entering they talk about the next race. They always talk about the next race and the G. And as the cars are effectively getting slower, we all know that the 2021 cars onwards will be slower. Definitely a way in, I think. Definitely.
Yeah. I do agree with you. I mean, she's been doing remarkably well in W Series, and not only that, because she has been pushing really for gender equality in motorsport. She's been racing even against men. So I really think that she is a perfect candidate to represent women in high-profile series in motorsport. So I really think she has a very bright future ahead, and I really think that we will see her in Formula One at some point. So things are looking great for women.
Yeah, she certainly already, she has her brand on her social media. I saw photos of her posing with young girl racers and signing autographs, and she's really enjoying that role model element. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's been lovely chatting. It's been lovely chatting with you today. That's all we got time for today. Obviously, we've been very busy this week, and we will bring you further updates on the news next week as well on Tuesday. Because let's not forget that this is a kind of extraordinary session that we did. Because yesterday at this time I was doing an exam, so that was pretty dramatic for me, and. As always, I really enjoy talking to you about motorsport, so I really hope to have a very interesting conversation next week as well.
Always a pleasure. We've got a nice round of applause from F1 Professor and Libuff UK, so thank you very much, Libuff UK. And it's always great to hear from the fans as well. Feel free to leave us some comments, and anyone who's watching this back, add your comments as well. Let us know what you think. Thanks very much, B, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.